With all of the great new metal in GT7 1.49, I actually wasn't sure where to start, so I thought, hey, why not start with a Ferrari? The Ferrari F430, or as we usually call it with this version, the 430 Scuderia. A 2007 car, which of course is a returning face. We already had the gorgeous F430, which it's funny how, incidentally, a game can make you love a car more than you usually would, because the F430 in real life, I'm kind of like, yeah, sure, I'll pay some attention to it, but in the game it just looks and feels so good to drive, and it's nice when a car has that kind of treatment and that kind of vibe in a game. This one is the more hardcore, of course even faster, even more savage, at least you would think, version of the already very quick F430 platform. Speaking to the point of it being savage though, that's actually where things get interesting, at least in my opinion, and I'd love to hear yours down below if you maybe disagree or agree. You can drive this car, of course, currently in the time trial event for the seasonals in GT7, so you don't even need to buy it before you try it, and it was that event where I first had my driving experience with this car coming back. And it really pleasantly surprised me because I thought it would be fairly twitchy, fairly tail happy, kind of kicking that back end out whenever it could, and it really isn't. In fact, I found it to be quite mellow, I think is the way I would describe it. Power is of course very good for its time, naturally aspirated 502 horses. It weighs about the same as a GT3 car at the time, so 1350 kilos, which, I mean, these days for a supercar that's hundreds of kilos lighter than many modern day machines, which modern compared to 2007 is a funny thing to say, but we kind of have moved along a lot in technology since then. Of course it is mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, as I said, naturally aspirated, and with a car that's already as good as the F430, this has a pretty damn good chance of being fantastic. And that to me is the really interesting part of this game compared to the past. It's not often where I will say that a newer Gran Turismo game kind of does a car more justice than an older one will. Because in the older games you have a huge amount of nostalgia helping out, and when you have so many more career mode events and wacky tuning and all that kind of stuff, it can rose tint those older memories, sometimes justifiably so, but sometimes maybe a bit too much. In the case of this game though, and GT Sport for that matter in some cases as well, because these cars are so painstakingly modelled into the game, not just visually, but I'm talking physics, sound, etc. And you can always nitpick, of course, the broad strokes. Specifically what I mean is, my memory of this car, in relation in particular to the normal F430 back when we had both next to each other in GT6, and also the SP1, based of course on the same platform but a lot more expensive, I never paid any attention to any of the three. I drove them when I reviewed them, and of course I did tune setups for them, but that was about it. Now, well, as I already said, I love driving the F430 in this game, and the Scuderia, perhaps not quite as much ironically, but certainly is a lovely car already, even with the time that I've already spent with it. And the real crucial thing is, back in GT6, the Scuderia felt like it was barely any quicker than the normal car, whereas now I almost don't care anymore if it's barely quicker or not, because A, top speed racing doesn't matter as much now as it did back in GT6, so back when I tuned up an F430 and then a Scuderia and found that both cars were pretty much just as quick in a straight line, it made me feel like one was kind of irrelevant, so just pick whichever one you prefer. You could still probably make that argument now. I haven't done a top speed comparison, so I'm not sure, but in a game which allows the car to just kind of be its own thing, enjoy the spotlight, have its 5 minutes of fame, that to me is where each car, even variations of a car, can really be allowed to shine. And that is one of the things which I think GT7 actually does quite well, when you have a certain machine that feels like it was made with love rather than by committee. And I'm not saying they all feel like that, but this is one occasion where, in particular, the F430 I think really does. Now the Scuderia won't necessarily be for everyone because it is a little heavy through corners, ironically, given what I expected, and the brakes take a bit of getting used to because they're not quite as powerful as you might initially think. Certainly if you spend a lot of time, as many of us do, driving race cars, this could feel a bit numb in comparison, but the bones of making a brilliant car are already there. It's got some pretty cool visual upgrades as well, some subtle chin splitter kind of stuff, some wackier big wing kind of stuff. If you want to go down the racing route, it allows you that maneuverability to choose, do you want to just drive this stock and enjoy it for what it is, kind of test drive unlimited style, do you want to, you know, make it crazy fast, more Midnight Club or Need for Speed-esque, or do you want to turn it into a track day monster, which is more Gran Turismo or Forza-esque? Plus, the price tag of 380 grand means it isn't really that expensive to buy anyway. You can simultaneously buy it brand new in the dealership or from the used dealer for a little bit less. Personally, I don't really see the point. In the case of cars like this, you may as well just pay full price when it's not really that much to begin with. And yeah, I'd say it's a nice new addition. We already knew, if I recall correctly, that this one was coming back. I think it was in the leaked data mining list. I could be wrong, there are so many cars to remember on there, but I think this was one of them. And it was a fan favourite that was pretty obvious. So much love for the Scuderia. I personally would love to see, incidentally, more games feature the 16M version, which is the rarer open-top version of the Scuderia, which, incidentally, Test Drive Unlimited 2 had. This is, I think, a fantastic new choice. More Ferraris are never going to be a bad thing, really. And yeah, beyond that, I don't think there's really too much to touch on. It's just a good car. I like it, I like the way it looks, it's got fantastic levels of detail compared to when we last saw it, and it was already a premium even back then, so the improvement is notable. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you love the car? Were you looking forward to it? Maybe were you disappointed by it? If so, I would be curious why. And of course, stick around over the next week or so, because I will be talking about all the rest of the cars in 1.49 as well. But for now, thanks for watching.